Welcome to A Plan for That podcast, where each week co-hosts Erin and Ryan will meet with progressive organizers, activists, and leaders. Together, we will educate, invigorate, and elevate the progressive movement. When we unite our voices, an army of progressives is possible. Hey, Ryan, I am just going to go off, and you got to bear with me here for a second because it's going to be a minute.
That's fine.
After I watched pundit after pundit talk about how Republicans fear Donald's mean tweets and that is the reason that they failed to defend our national security today.
Sure. Yeah.
All I can say is this. If cowardice and criminality are all that's left of the GOP, then we need to vote them out of existence. And the best way to do this is going to be electing progressives, because guess what? They're not afraid of being politically unpopular. They're not afraid of media pundits because they serve the American people and not corruption and not corporations.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
So we got some work to do. And everybody, if you follow me on Twitter at wellness4u13, wellness, the number 4u13, I have a pinned tweet of a whole slate of candidates that we are going to get ready to elect and join our army of progressives. Ryan, I know that you've seen it. Are you excited?
I am excited. I think that it's a huge deal, and we should do more to elect progressives. I mean, to be honest, we just need to the Republican Party needs to be destroyed, but I don't want to step on your rant at all. Like I'm done with them.
They're terrible. They are literally a threat to our national security at this point. They seriously are like a terrorist organization. And I'm sorry, I know that sounds hyperbolic, but we live in times where it's the fact.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. They are just they have no morality. And there's no redemption arc for them at this point. They're just terrible.
Exactly. And I'm beyond who owns them. How does Putin know what they did? And what is the compromise? I don't care. Get them out. Get them out of power. And Chuck Schumer, you stay tough because you are going to have to fight, my friend.
Man, he's been great this week, hasn't he?
Yes. My theory, Ryan, I'm just going to whisper it in your ear, listeners. I think he's a little cozy with Elizabeth Warren, and I'm all for it.
If this is what we're getting with him being cozy with Elizabeth Warren, I'm good with it. Honestly, whoever's in his ear, I'm good with it. This is exactly what we've needed out of a Senate majority leader for a long, long time.
Amen. But we need to watch Mitch because he's not done. And anyone who thinks that he's done has forgotten completely who the snake in the grass is.
Absolutely. I mean, and look, right? Like he's always going to get his. He's always going to be working that angle, trying to find another way that he can seize power. That's who Mitch McConnell is, which is one of the reasons that I had a major issue with trying to do this sort of power sharing thing with the Republicans. Is if you give them anything, they're gonna try and sprint with it.
Exactly, and so this is so important because we all know that if Democrats don't pass big, meaningful, structural change, we're looking at a bloodbath coming up in the midterms. So that's how important it is. We need to move, and we need to move like a locomotive train at this point. People are hurting. People need money, and they need it now.
Absolutely, and it's not just money, right? It's opportunity. Like we need the ability to come back from this. And if you want to help small business, you want to help mom and pop shops, then you need to put money in the hands of people who shop there. I mean, it's not going to be this big deal where people aren't willing to spend money. They just don't have money to spend right now.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So we need to find a way. We need to find a way to make sure that Americans who want to spend money can. And the only way to do that is to put it in their hands directly. And I know that the Senate Republicans aren't interested in that, but frankly, they lost. They lost the election.
Elections have consequences, right?
Exactly. And that's what we should have been saying for a long time now. That's what we should be doing is not rubbing it in their faces per se, but elections do have consequences, and we won big. It shouldn't be, an issue where we're trying just to get basic things done over the next however many weeks, months, and hopefully years that we have the majority. I mean, these are things that we need to do today. These are things that we need to do right now so that people can live their lives in a way that is better for them. And the only way that we do that is to use the power that they gave us. We can't continue to do this game where we take power back from the Republicans just to try and triangulate as far as what's going to piss them off or not piss them off. That's the ultimate way that we lose, is by playing that game and giving them power when they didn't earn it.
Exactly. So, Ryan, what you're saying is so important. And as Chuck Schumer said last night on Rachel Maddow, and I totally agree with him, we need to do so many things, and we need to do them all at once, because getting back to what you just said about putting money back in the customer's hands, I'm going to tell you, I used to run a massage studio. I've been in the field for over 25 years, and I'm not giving massages right now. It's not safe. It is not safe. Nobody has been vaccinated in our area, and it is not okay to be running a massage business. So we've got to do the money. We've got to do the opportunity. And yes, we need to get people those vaccines.
Right. There's just no alternative. There's nothing more that we can do than putting money in people's hands and getting them healthy. That's the beginning, middle, and end of the things that need to happen right now. Exactly. Economic recovery and health recovery. And look, I don't want to go too long here on this, but I think it's important to just say we're not going to get those 400,000 people back. That's a price that we can't recover from. And we need to do everything that we can to make sure that those numbers are not continuing to grow. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we understand that number is much bigger than 400,000 because of the economic cost of this.
That's exactly right. And you know what? I am so glad that we're talking about this, because we have the perfect guest, and we're getting ready to welcome him right now. This is our exciting guest, Duncan Sill. Duncan is working on One Paycheck Away movie. This is a documentary, and his outcast lens has weaved uncanny stories into filmmaking to address how humanity reconciles with our chaotic, often incomprehensible, divisive world. He is a New York University graduate. He's been involved in the film industry since 2007 with film program policies, tax incentives, and film studio development. Some of his film work includes Somebody Next Door, director and producer, Homeless Ashes, executive producer, Drunktown's Finest, executive producer, Sundance Selection, Robert Redford, executive producer. With extensive economic, natural resources, and community development experience, he brings a unique and raw point of view a unique, raw point of view and access to invoke disparate disciplines into potential call to action that comes from deep spaces of characters and places. And boy, Duncan, I don't know about you, Ryan, but I think we need it, and we need it right now. Where is the movie? We want to watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and really, it sounds like you have a really interesting background. It's good to have you on the podcast. You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, from that description, I don't know who that guy is.
You're inspiring. And I just have to ask, at least for my own curiosity and for our listeners, how did you come up with One Paycheck Away? Tell us all about it.
Oh, I think there were a couple of different things that prompt this project. I was involved with several different initiatives across the country, whether they were film related or community development, and working with different constituencies and policymakers. Through that process, somehow I became really jaded. And the reason behind that was primarily due to the fact that I saw a lot of intentions turned in ways that translate into lack of action for the benefit of the people who are supposed to be receiving these benefits.
Exactly.
Instead of being front and center and honest and transparent about the intention, if I'm going to go into something just for self-gain, I should just announce it and let everyone know and not put different labels and language and things in place that mislead people. And I think that happens quite often. And a lot of these people who were affected, they were not in a position where they could absorb a lot of mistakes and setbacks. So I continue to see that, but without, this current intention of doing this movie. So about 2 years ago, I ran into someone at a cafe. I can't even remember, which cafe it was. It was a casual conversation, and these people asked me if I had any follow-up to a documentary that I did on hunger, which was the Somebody Next Door documentary.
Wow.
And in there specifically, they said, well, they were struck by how I brought up the phenomenon of one paycheck away. They realized that they were one of these people.
Yes.
And they wanted to know what's really happening. And I didn't think too much about it. My immediate response was, well, it seems like the economy is doing okay. But for the next week or so, every day, it really just bugged me. I needed to, kind of dig a little deep into what's going on. And I was just astounded when I uncovered that almost 80% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck.
That's right. That's right.
So I was like, no freaking way. So I did, I spent about 2 months doing really deep research to validate. And at the end of it, I was convinced, that was a fact. That was the reality. And there's something else behind all of this, the kind of the puppet masters behind the curtain.
Yes, tell us. I want to hear this.
Well, the strings that the puppet master has been pulling have been fairly effective to numb our sensibility to believe that if we just do the right things, follow the rules, everything's going to be all right. You can make, mistakes here and there, but you could just, pardon the cliche thing, pull yourselves up by the bootstrap.
There you go. I was right in my head when you said that.
but here we go. I've been noticing, the reason why I'm jaded is that because guess what? The bootstraps of a lot of these people are freaking broken.
Right.
There's nothing to pull.
Right.
So what really, is going on? So this is a long-winded answer to your question about how I got here. So it didn't happen overnight. It took years of just doing things, observing, getting sick and tired of all the promises out there, seeing people fall and can't get back up. I finally got to a point where, F it. I got to do something about this.
Well, good.
The best way I know how is to tell a real, honest, direct story from people who are being affected. So that's why it's, this is a character-driven documentary. It's not a top-down approach. It's not about sitting down with a whole bunch of experts, talking heads, for them to regurgitate their writings and commentaries. I want this from people who are being affected, who are trying to do something to get out of this nightmare.
See, and I know that Ryan and I, not that we're trying to be in your show, but we could be, both of us could be in your show. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what you're describing. It sounds like, not just my existence, but my family's existence growing up. Like that's exactly how I grew up, is paycheck to paycheck. It was a struggle to figure out how we're going to build any kind of nest egg for the family. And there's just no stability. There's no structure. There's just survival.
Exactly. And for me, it was 2008, Duncan. I bought my very own condo in 2006, like a moron, because I'm not psychic and had no idea that our entire world was going to fall apart. So I bought at the top of the market, and I lost big time when the market fell apart. And I went from making $3,000 a month to making $300. And that's not a mortgage, okay? So I had to go belly up, declare bankruptcy, and now I'm scraping my way back from there. And it's not because I'm not smart, and it's not because I did a bad job. In fact, I worked 5 part-time jobs, you guys. By the way, don't ever do that. It made me really, really sick. But I worked 5 part-time jobs so that I could hang on to my house. And yeah, we need you, Duncan. We really do. And I'm wondering how quickly this project will be available for people to be able to watch.
Well, we were hoping prior to the onset of the pandemic to, by this time, actually have something. We were doing really well, coordinating with the key characters in the different regions of the country.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, during that period, we started to get international attention. So we had folks from Wales, Scotland, Germany, Austria, Ireland reaching out to us, wanting to find a way to coordinate. And we knew that, well, let me back up a little bit. I knew that when I begun the development of this was not going to be a one-off. This needed to be a continuum where we invite and engage folks who are being affected, who might be walking to find solutions to these major issues, and both of you guys mentioned, I think, the notion of stability. Yeah. We grow up conventionally. We were conditioned to believe that if we just stick with it, there will be stability. That was probably the constant that we had, without realizing it was so vulnerable, so shaky. The foundation was so sandy that we didn't know what we were walking on, and we kept believing everything that everyone was telling us. And so, because of the pandemic, we're waiting to get back on site and to locations to spend more time with these key characters. But we're almost there. So I want to find a way that in the third act of the film, there will be a pathway from the lens and the actions of these characters that would identify, hey, these are people who don't have a whole lot of means. They've gone through trusting the status quo, and they got fucked by the status quo. So, and by the time that they realize that they already tried to comply with what the status quo offered them.
Of course.
And nothing worked. And
well,
yeah, Go ahead.
And not only that, and Duncan, you were just, I don't mean to interject, but you were just really sparking very important thoughts in my mind of when I did need to try and save my condo. Everyone, you may or may not remember that we had this mortgage forgiveness under the Obama administration. And I am a person who will tell you the God's honest truth. I applied in 2009. Okay. Now, ask me when I finally got the letter that says that I can get my mortgage forgiven.
2014.
Just about. I had already declared bankruptcy, lost my home, and it was nearly 2013. It was almost 2013.
Well, and that example is demonstrative of how disconnected leadership, so-called leadership, is in America.
Yes. Thank you.
So, Duncan, just a quick question for you here, and this may be off topic, but I want to ask it anyway. If somebody is unfamiliar with this problem, and I know that it's a widespread problem, a lot of people are very familiar with it, but if we wanted to understand the mechanics behind this, what did you research to kind of put you in that place where you could build these characters in a way that it's not just believable or suspending disbelief, but in a way that is truthful to the problem? What talk me through the process of your research in this?
Well, so I academically I'm trained as a sociologist and an economist. So I began my research validating the literature and the expert commentaries that put these things in context, and oftentimes it leads you into somewhat of a rabbit hole for policymaking, for investments, or so-called financial economic solutions, without going into the whole kind of matrix of, monetary versus fiscal policies and when they apply, under what administration, blah, 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 blah. It's all the same shit. They have, their recipes, and they hand it off to one another, and you could kind of follow the money, literally. Why they do that? Because they need to retain the status quo.
So Duncan, I'm sorry, but I just want to interject one quick second, because what you just said is so important. The status quo, you guys, he just said it. The status quo remains because everyone hands the problem off instead of fixing the wound, as Ryan likes to say. No one scrubs it. We just look for another paycheck from another rich donor. And this is one of the reasons why I'm just fed up. I want an army of progressives. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm shushing now.
Well, and to your point, I intentionally have been very cautious about how to fund this movie. The conventional, other things that I've done, you go to investors and you go and set yourself up to apply for grants. I'm not doing any of that. I do not want any questions about the money that I'm associated with.
Sure.
Yes.
So I've self-funded the development of this. We're going to go to a crowdfunding campaign where we know that we're going to head back into production to finish the film. And we're going to trust that the messages that we're able to convey will appeal to people who want to come with us to find solutions. And whatever we get from that, that's what we're going to produce and make the film out of. Period.
Yes, exactly. I really respect that, and I know Ryan does too.
Absolutely.
Because we talk every day about who our elected leaders are accountable to. And I'm sorry, but there's just not enough of them that are answering to the American people. Right.
I really admire the diligence in making sure that you know where the money is at all times. I mean, a huge issue that we hear about with a lot of activist things, that they kind of cross that undrawn line, that you have to ask questions about their motivations, or you have to ask questions about, who's really funding this. There becomes this sort of cloud over what they're doing, and it's really good to hear that you're not doing that. I would respect you anyway, but it's nice to know that question's not there.
Well, and also, Ryan, you brought up a little bit of your background, and Erin, with the condo as well. Why do we keep doing these things to set ourselves up where we become a slave to money? I'm not opposed to money being a tool, for us in society. It should remain as a tool for using as exchange for goods and services. We have weaponized it. We have used it to manipulate.
Absolutely.
And so you see that, through all the politics, all the social dialogue, through our indebted culture. It's what we believe that will make our lives better. It's without saying it, it's all, it's got this God dimension to it that we don't want to let go. We are so afraid to not do things without money.
Well, and now we're in a really dangerous situation. Ryan and I were just talking about this before we were lucky enough to welcome you together. And that is, we are finally in power. The Democrats are finally in power. And the danger is, if we don't move and get things done for the American people, not only is that going to lead to, a depressed turnout in midterms, but honestly, we don't really have a lot of remedies that I see, Duncan. I mean, if you can't vote for the leaders who are going to change things because of voter suppression and discriminatory practices in the voting process, it's almost like, okay, where's our lifeline?
Absolutely, and some of the major challenges the key characters in this documentary present is that they could no longer rely on the political system.
Yes. Yes.
So that is a very uncomfortable feeling for most people. Well, and we have witnessed it, during this pandemic, just with the stimulus package. That measly, okay, well, how long did it take for them to disperse $1,200 of UBI to the public?
Right.
And while the unemployment system was completely broken, they knew heading in it was broken. Why were they mucking with it?
Yes. And to your point,
it's a distraction. Everything, on the political arena, and that's why they partner so well with the media, because the news cycle feeds into that frenzy. It's a perpetual spin cycle, where, okay, the more that we get distracted, the less we're going to be able to focus and come together and say, we got something we could work with, instead of being all scattered and blaming, and I mean, there are people who, who need to be blamed, fair enough, who are responsible, but we're at a point where, okay, we don't have time for that. And our leadership, as you mentioned, if they don't step up to demonstrate that they have a willingness or the ability, something else a lot worse than what we have seen will occur.
Yes. And so just really quickly, and I know Ryan wants to get in here too. I want to know, just off the top of your head, and I'm not putting you on the spot, I promise. I want to know what you would advise your viewers and our listeners who admire what you're saying. Like, what do we do? What is our best action?
Well, it's a gradient of participation, but I think, as a common humanity, we have to recognize what in the status quo is so insidious to shape us to an existence of fear and anxiety and hopelessness versus letting that go and going back to what can I do right now to meet the basic fundamental needs for myself, people I care about. A lot of it translates into individual and collective actions about access to food. Housing is a big issue, right? A clean environment. These things could be accountable. These are basic fundamental aspects of being human. So there are two major questions, that are themes in questions in the movie, and I'll disclose that right now. Just as a kind of an opening an invitation to anyone who wants to chime in. So I asked two questions. The first one is, what does it mean to be human now? And the second related question is, what kind of life do you want to live? And to your point, if we could take the time, not necessarily to answer those two questions completely, but really take some actions to figure out what that really means to you or the people you care about. I mean, for me, it's doing this, right? It could be different for you. Maybe Erin, you want to go buy another condo.
No, actually, I'm happily married now, guys, and we're living in our own home. But one of the things that you just mentioned, and Ryan is going to echo me on this, I'm sure of it, because we talk about this all the time. One of the things that I do when I am absolutely up against the wall and have no idea how to make things change is I take one step. And today that step may be calling my member of Congress and asking them to pass the Raise the Wage Act. And that one step may be working like hell to get as many progressives elected as possible, But for me, I need an action. Give me something to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do agree that, everybody kind of, when you get into one of those spots where you feel like nothing can get done, you kind of retreat into the things that are comfortable for you. For me, it's philosophy. And you mentioned, the basic fundamental parts about being human. And I'm a Lockean guy. I'm a John Locke guy. It's kind of what pushed me to change my whole worldview on this, on progressive politics and moving in this direction. And one of the things that he talks about, and it's very well quoted, everybody knows it, are the inalienable rights of life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness, depending on what you're reading, obviously. But the thing that I always come back to, and if we talk about the paycheck to paycheck life, we talk about the struggles of the middle of the road people, of the lower classes who have to worry about these things. For me, it's we talk about life as the right to survive. And we talk about liberty as, in my opinion, the ability and the right to live without fearing for your own survival. And it's wild to me that in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, that we still have people that can't, first of all, can't even survive. But second of all, that those who are considered well off are still just on the brink of not being able to survive. It's wild to me that we talk about these rights as though they're gifts, as though they're given to all of us, but we don't do anything to protect those rights for people. That so many of us fear that moment that we're not going to know what to do if the market crashes and we lose our condo, right? There's nowhere for us to turn.
Exactly. And I'm going to bring this around to our previous episode just because it's the perfect spot for Duncan to weigh in. our previous episode, I talked about just a simple act of driving around looking at Christmas lights with my family. And Duncan, we saw a house, and I really want you to visualize this with me. It was the size of a normal single family home, and there was another single family home just attached to it. And so here's what I'm telling you. One family lives in a house that is the size of my house, double itself. And when I live on the other side of town, okay, and we can barely afford to live the life that we're living, it just disgusts me. It disgusts me that on the opposite side of town, we have someone who has so much wealth, so much that they've amassed, that they almost don't even know what to do with it because they buy a house that's the size of a grocery store.
Right. And in many ways, it's also a reflection of how empty our lives might be. Where you know, the only thing that we could demonstrate our worth is to have something to show off to them, you know, like, you know, at the end of the day, when a hurricane hits, they don't fucking care, you know, if you got a 20,000 feet house or you live on the street, y'all gone, you know. It's not like, and that's what I appreciate when I go back to Louisiana. Not only that a lot of people have been affected by the socioeconomic impact and gentrification and displacement, but they'll live a whole life where their entire existence could be upended by a natural disaster. They look at things differently than a lot of us in different parts of the country. And what you were just saying, you know, if my whole existence was just surrounded by adding more and more lights to my house, I'm not really I shouldn't be anyone that anybody should be paying attention to. I'm basically a parasite to society.
Thank you. And now I'm going to tell you one final story, y'all. So when I was younger, much younger, I was babysitting for a family in Barrington. And if you're not from Illinois, Barrington is one of the rich, highfalutin areas, okay? It even sounds like it, Barrington. But anyway, the family that I was babysitting for had no furniture, none. They had a chair and a table. That's it. And so I said to the mom, I said, "Oh, you guys must have just moved in. What a nice house." And of course, it was one of these enormous 4,000 square feet and larger kind of homes. And she just looked at me and said, "No, we've lived here for 9 years." And without saying it, what she told me is they can't afford that house. Okay? They can't afford that house. And it gets to the question that you just brought up. Why do you want this house that you can't afford?
I can't answer that for those individuals, but I mean, for me, you know, I made a conscious decision not to pursue life just for the sake of accumulating things. Not to say that I don't have needs, you know. Once in a while, you know, when it was okay to be walking around, you know, I like a latte from a cafe.
Sure.
But I drive I think my truck is a 1999 truck. I don't see myself buying a new vehicle ever. Those things just don't appeal to me. I mean, but that's just me. But a lot of people out there, you know, they've been conditioned or believe that having things make them feel worthy, and that's going to be an individual choice and a reflection that hopefully more people would have.
Yeah, I I'd like to touch on one thing that you said there, because it struck with me, and it's something that I've been thinking about for a little while now. I have this feeling, maybe it's probably not just me, but this idea that as a society we have a tendency to seek happiness rather than joy, and we get the two mixed up.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep thinking about this pursuit of stuff, this pursuit of this kind of selfish, fleeting, just chase for the serotonin kind of thing, when what we're seeking is fulfillment, and we're seeking something that's longer lasting, something we can share with other people. And you look at these giant houses that people buy. You look at if you have a '99 truck. I live in Minnesota. There's tons of trucks out here that people just buy new trucks in the suburbs because they think that it's going to be a reflection of who they are, and they have this idea of a person that they want to be that's not them, because they've concocted this idea of what a happy person looks like, and it doesn't sit well with me, and it never really has. So I guess my question to you would be, you're making this documentary about people living paycheck to paycheck. Is that consistent with the kind of thing that you see people seeking? It's not always about money, but how much more could we do for people with pulling them out of this trap of living paycheck to paycheck?
So several of the characters actually had different notions of, as you mentioned, Ryan, what made them happy prior.
Yeah.
And then something happened, right? And it may not be a single occurrence or event. And then they okay, well, we fixed it. We're going to go back to normal, right? Because we keep hearing this shit about what everyone wants to go back to normal. It's like, hold on, time out. What we had as normal is probably okay. Exactly, Erin. So several of the characters actually went through character arcs where their lives changed so much that their perspective on life right now is very different of what they assume to be the pursuit of happiness, of something that was worthy to them. All those things have become dismantled. And that's why the tone of this documentary is really like a walking nightmare. When you follow these individuals and how they open up. I've been fortunate enough where they have been extremely honest about how they have gotten here and what they want right now. And it's not about money anymore. So, and to me, to some extent, part of the narrative that I'm putting into this is that, well, maybe one paycheck away isn't such a bad thing. Maybe when it happens, when you found it, that's when you realize that this is who I am. I'm finally acknowledging, what I need to do. And that could be a good thing for a lot of people.
I really respond to that. Now, I'm going to do what I always do. Ryan knows it. I'm going to be the dark cloud. And I'm going to talk about living on credit. And I'm going to make sure that our listeners and all of us here agree that there are two kinds of people living on credit. Yes, there are the people who are just status seeking, keep up with the Joneses, I want to have what everyone else has people. But there are people, and I will raise my hand, who can't afford life. They can't afford life. I cannot afford to do what it is that I need to do to get my child who's autistic the services that he needs, the materials, the extra materials that he needs for school, because he is very, very smart and I have to keep him challenged and focused. So I use a credit card. And one of the things that one of my biggest role models, Elizabeth Warren, pointed out a long time ago is that the percentage of America that is living on credit, it should be a red alarm. It should be a bell that goes off for the government to realize that this is a crisis that's just slow walking, just waiting to go off a cliff.
It's part of the nightmare. It's sort of that little bit of lifeline that is fed into each one of us, that we believe that if we just hold on long enough, a little harder, everything is going to be okay. But we don't realize that slow drip, like we're lying in a hospital bed. At some point, it's someone's going to stop and pull it. It's not, that dark cloud of debt. And now they're downplaying it. The national dialogue. It's the same people who, 10 years ago was criticizing, we can't be doing all this Reaganomics shit, right? Guess what?
Yeah.
Well, we sit here. Our public debt has risen to $29 trillion. And our private debt, I think, is hovering around $24 trillion. So here's the thing that you don't really hear on the news, because they don't want us to talk about it, or let alone think about it, is that our debt, our public debt to GDP, gross domestic product ratio, it's about 140% right now, which is the worst in the history of America. It is worse in ratio than it was in the 1930s depression. And it's
oh my God.
And it's going, it's going, in the wrong direction. And we don't want to deal with it.
And then Ryan needs to weigh in here too, because then on the other side, Duncan, you have a $740 billion, I think it's trillion dollar military budget. Something's not right, guys.
Yeah, I definitely think that we overspend in a number of areas and underspend in plenty of others. Like, look, I think it was Eisenhower had a quote that said that every dollar that we spend in national defense is a dollar wasted, that we're making the world less safe. That we think we're purchasing security, and we're not purchasing security. There's a number of places that we would be better served to invest better in, and obviously I've been a huge proponent of education as that, but obviously I'm open to other things.
And Ryan Eisenhower was a military leader, so he knows what he's talking about.
At what point do are you so vested in the military? You're no longer defending yourselves. We might be at that point. I don't want to speak, in twisted tone, but Ryan, there are many other things we should be spending money on, including I mean, we could totally, with one action, we could completely erase student debt in the country, and it's not even that big of an amount. I mean, even though it's now more than credit card debt, but compared to everything else that we spend on, again, back to my point, we have weaponized money, we have used money to manipulate. And the actions and the conscience of the people who are doing this, there ought to be more reflection on it.
Agreed. So I have to ask, and you don't have to answer, I promise, but Duncan, are you a Warren Democrat? Because you sound like you might be.
I'm actually fairly apolitical. And I think that's part of being jaded. I work on policy making on the local, state, federal, and tribal level. So I've seen a lot of things go on. I don't profess to sound like I'm an expert but I've been through the rounds, and I've heard a lot of things, I've witnessed a lot of things. So the actions And why this movie is fairly apolitical. It doesn't have a lot of political undertones. It's because, the individuals who are being affected, the characters, they've been burned by the political systems. It doesn't matter what party they belong to. So they realize that, okay, this is the time they need to take actions for themselves and the people they really care about. And maybe the politicians will follow.
Well, the reason I brought her up, obviously I like her, but the reason I brought her up was because she is for canceling student debt, for precisely what you were talking about, because that is something that would free up just an intense amount of debt that the society is living under right now.
You look at the unemployment rate for that demographic, the younger demographics who are barely 2-3 years out of college. And walking around witnessing, what's been going on in the country for this last 2 years, how can you have any hope of a future? Why would you even try? Yeah, exactly.
Because we have to, right, Ryan? We have to. If we don't do it, who will?
That's exactly correct.
But I can't wait to see the movie. And this is my wish. And then I want to hear from Ryan. My wish is that everybody will look at the movie, will ask themselves the hard questions, and will move forward together to make change. That is
absolutely.
my wish.
I totally agree. And look, I'm excited to see what comes of this project. Obviously, this is something that I've lived, and it's going to be something I'm really interested to see. Is there a place that we can go to for updates and check out where we can find this movie when we eventually get out of this malaise of a pandemic?
Oh yeah. We're trying to keep our website updated, so that's onepaycheckawaymovie.com. And we're gonna probably be composting some very short videos on different pieces. There's quite a bit of footage and info and pictures in the gallery. When you guys have a couple of minutes, take a look at it, give us some comments, and maybe have some suggestions, and maybe we could find a way to continue our dialogue and shape that as part of the content too. We're open ended in terms of our process.
Absolutely.
Duncan, that's amazing to hear. And of course, you beat me to it because I was just going to ask if we could have you back. I'm very, very interested, and you're quite thought provoking. And it's just too much fun. Yeah. We can't say goodbye forever. I would
love possible. to come back and talk about some of our characters, to present them, and then you could see, why they're so important to the narrative of this.
I'll tell you what, this is my idea, but Ryan, I want to hear you too. What if we did something like that right before the release so that we could get people
all in
excited?
On that if Duncan's in on that.
Absolutely, I appreciate it, and I'm grateful to be on the show and have you guys show such a deep interest in this topic and what we're doing. So, and again, we welcome comments. We talk to people. They want to share something, reach out to us. This is not a pigeonhole, top down, type of commentary documentary. It's a work in progress, and we want this to be a continuum for some time to come.
I love that organic style. And if you don't mind, Duncan, I found you on Twitter. So would you mind telling our listeners where you are?
We're on, I think, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So Twitter is _Paycheck Away. And then on our website, you should just be able to click on the icon. It'll lead you to all the social media content. So it's all So again,
Excellent.
That's onepaycheckawaymovie.com.
And we're going to have that pinned as soon as we release this episode, y'all. So you won't have any problems finding it. And Ryan, we need this movie. This is such an important
Absolutely.
discussion.
I totally agree, and I'm excited to see it. Duncan, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to having you back around the time of the release, and until then, good luck with that.
Thank you. Stay in touch.
Absolutely.
You too.
Take good care, Duncan.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for you. Such an important thing that they're doing. It really is, and I can't wait to see the fruition.
I totally agree. It was a great conversation. It's great to have him on, and I'm excited for the next time we do, because I think that's what, especially since he's apolitical. There's no bias there. And I know he says he doesn't like to present himself like an expert, but it's clear that he's studied this. It's clear that he understands it. And we need more people that understand this issue. And we need more people who do understand this issue to speak out in the way that he's speaking out. So I'm deeply appreciative for him coming on.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tack on to the apolitical that he's also not a PAC. He's not taking money from any large donors. He's funding this all himself, you guys, because it is that important for him to be devoid of any associations that are unseemly.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're getting close to the end here, and look, I'm not about to dive into something completely new, but I got to talk for just a minute about why it's so important that we get rid of this filibuster.
Oh, tell it, Ryan. Come on.
Look, we elected 50 Democrats to the Senate. And we elected a Democratic presidential ticket by an overwhelming number.
Yes.
That gives the Democrats the majority in the U.S. Senate. Like it or not, I know it looks 50-50 on paper, but 51 votes is 51 votes. And in a democracy, 51 votes, the 51% out of 100 needs to govern. It needs, I hesitate to use the word rule. I don't like the word rule in a democracy. I don't like it when Republicans use it. I don't like it when Democrats use it. But I'll tell you this, and I'll be very, very blunt and honest. If we don't use the power that was given to us as a Democratic caucus in the U.S. Senate to make people's lives materially improve under President Biden, we are going to lose in 2022, in 2024, and we're going to deserve it. Here's the thing. When we get rid of the filibuster, I understand that there's some apprehension there, because what happens when we lose? We'll have no safeguard. Here's the thing. Whether we lose or whether we win, we need to stand up for democracy. We need...
That's right. And whoever plans to lose, Ryan,
no one
why
plans
are we
to
even
lose,
thinking
but
about
look,
it?
Things change, races happen, people lose. We have to understand that there's going to be times when we don't win. We're not going to win every fight. We're not going to win every race, and that's okay. It's okay to accept that we're not going to win everything. We're going to try, but we're not going to win everything.
Heck yeah.
And when those days come, when those Congresses come where we're no longer in the majority, when it happens that the Republicans, God help us if they all win. But if it happens that they do, and we don't have a filibuster, is that going to suck? Yeah, it's going to suck. It's going to be awful. But if we want to hold on to that, we got to win. And we got to use the power that's given to us by the voters every time we do. No excuses. That means that we need to get rid of the filibuster. There's no reason that a 2/3 majority should rule in a country where 51% were elected. There's no reason that we should be discussing whether or not we want to have a 60% majority in the Senate. There's no reason for it. There's no reason to have 60 votes. And first of all, you're not going to get it. You have today a vote in the U.S. Senate to dismiss the presidential impeachment of Donald Trump, who was impeached as president and is now a private citizen and still needs to stand trial for that impeachment as president. And 55% is the highest number we could get.
It's terrible, Ryan. And in fact, I saw a meme, you guys, and I love my memes. I saw a meme that really perfectly describes the danger of that moment. It says, an unsuccessful coup that goes without accountability is a practice run.
That's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Look, the Nazis didn't stop with the beer hall putsch. They didn't stop. When Adolf Hitler got into power and there was the Reichstag fire, there was no accountability. They didn't stop. He took more power. Every time you give fascists an inch, they will push that inch further and further and further. And furthermore, in my mind, if we don't hold these people accountable by eliminating the filibuster, by passing every piece of democratic legislation that we promised to our voters in 2020, if we don't do that, then what we're doing is akin to appeasement that Neville Chamberlain tried to pass against the Nazis in the 1930s as they expanded through Europe. All it did was it allowed them to get bigger, stronger, emboldened, and face zero consequences because we were afraid to make them angry. Because the British were afraid to stand up to them because we thought that we could end this peacefully. There's not a peaceful end here. The end is total annihilation. You have to destroy fascists or they will come back every single time.
And if anyone thinks that Ryan is being hyperbolic, allow me to show you how you're wrong. Right now, Mitch McConnell is himself threatening us right now. So that's part one. And then we have people in the Senate who are saying, oh, we can't do an impeachment because then what if the terrorists get mad? That's more threats. So what do, Ryan? Do we negotiate with terrorists? Because I'm pretty sure that we don't.
And we shouldn't negotiate with fascists, right? There is absolutely no reason for us to continue to negotiate with people who will not negotiate with us in bad faith. And this is the biggest issue that I have with people like Kirsten Sinema and people like Joe Manchin, who say that they're not going to change their minds and they're digging their heels in on the filibuster. What do you think you're going to get out of Mitch McConnell? What do you think you're going to get? Yep. Or do you really think he's going to negotiate in good faith? Have the last 15 years of Republicans in Congress shown that they're willing to give us anything in good faith? They have not once shown any ounce of good faith, and anything that the Democrats have done to push the ball in any direction of any kind of progress has been met with rigorous and hateful rhetoric.
Yep, and let's go even further, Ryan. Trump is evil. Get me right. I am not saying he isn't, but none of what he did would have been possible without Mitch, okay? Mitch is bad, and he has got to be treated like the snake in the grass that he is.
And I have to correct you on one thing there, because you're right. Mitch is a problem, Trump was a problem, and they enabled each other. But the biggest problem, the number one issue facing this nation in our government, isn't Mitch McConnell, and it wasn't Donald Trump. It's the Republican Party.
Yes, they all have to go.
The biggest issue facing our government right now is that 74 million people believe that certain people deserve rights and others don't. The biggest issue facing our government right now, our way of life, is that 74 million people believe that at a pull of a trigger, they should be able to decide who their president is, as opposed to the voters deciding who their president is. And that is a threat to our way of life, and we need to address it like it's a threat to our way of life. We cannot continue without accountability and push for unity in a broken status quo. We have to fix the status quo before we fix our relationship with the right.
Yes, and I don't know about you, Ryan, but in addition to calling my member of Congress and talking about getting rid of the filibuster and how it's absolutely vital, I'm going to push, in addition to the raise the wage and thrive agenda, there's another one, y'all. It's voting rights. We have got to protect it because they're already signaling how they're going to shut down everyone's right to vote and further discriminate.
Absolutely. But you know what we don't get? You know what we don't get if we don't eliminate the filibuster?
All of it.
All of that.
Mm-hmm.
All of that. We hand the power right back to Mitch McConnell. Even though they lost, even though we won, we hand them the power back. And I've said it before, I'll say it a million times. I'm sick and I am tired of Democrats rolling over when we have the power.
That's right.
When you have the sword, you swing it.
Yes, Ryan. Yes.
You don't let them take the weapon back. You don't let them take the power back. As soon as you give them power, it's over.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so what we need to do, guys, and I'm ready. I'm writing my to-do list right now. calling my senators and I'm calling my congresspeople tomorrow. We need to remove the filibuster. This is job number one.
If you're listening in Arizona, if you're listening in West Virginia, frankly, if you're listening anywhere, if you're listening in Montana, but those three especially, Montana, West Virginia, Arizona, call your senators.
Yes.
Call your senators. Do not sit and let nothing happen for the next 2 years while we argue over a procedural rule that only started in the Senate to stop the civil rights movement.
Yes.
We should not let this happen, and it's happening because of Democrats. It's not because of Mitch McConnell that they're not eliminating the filibuster. It's because Democrats are standing in the way from those three states, and we need to get our caucus in order because Chuck Schumer sounds like he's ready to move. Elizabeth Warren's ready to move. Ed Markey's ready to move. There are plenty of people in that Senate that want it done, and those three are the ones standing in the way. It's not the Republicans that are hurting us right now. It's Democrats.
And what they need is to hear from you guys, because this is my last little soapbox, and then I promise we'll sign off for tonight. If these people feel the pain, so to speak, i.e. lose their races, then it becomes important. And that is why they need to hear from their constituencies. Their constituencies need to show them how upset we are. And no one, Ryan, no one is going to be looking back on an election that we lose in the midterms talking about how it was all the filibuster's fault. But I'll tell you what, they will be talking about my life didn't get any better and all the promises were lies. That's what will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It's going to start with the $2,000 checks that didn't go out immediately.
Yep.
It's going to start there and get worse if we do nothing. But if we pass big structural change,
yay!
we're going to be able to wash this away. These first 3 weeks where it was gridlock and politics as usual will get washed away the minute that we start helping people.
Amen. Well, Ryan, I am super, super excited. We're going to make sure that everyone knows how to reach Duncan and how to look in on One Paycheck Away. And
Absolutely.
Then we're going to move that dark cloud, start taking action, and join the army of progressives.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I appreciate your time.